Chevre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich begashmis und beruchnis. Healthy, strong and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos, Parshas Dvarim, Shabbos Chazayin. And we're going to speak a thought of the week. Today I heard the sad news that one of the greatest Chassidim that ever lived, Harav HaChassid, Reb Yoel, Kahn, the Rebbe's Chayzer, passed away. Originally, I thought about speaking one idea connected to the Parsha Shavua, but when I heard this news, I decided to speak another thought, which I think is directly related to Reb Yoel. But before that, as usual, we'll start with a kapitel, a prayer. That's from kapitel Tzadik Beis, Posuk Yud Gimel. Tzadik katomo yifrach, ke'erez balvonoin yizger. The righteous one will flourish like a palm tree. He will grow tall like a cedar in Lebanon. There's a Sefer Devarim in Chelik Beis where he chazes a Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. And he says, V'amich kulam tzadikim, there's two types of people. There's one person who's like a tomar, a palm tree. And what does he do? He makes beautiful fruits. And then there's another type of person who's ke'erez, like a cedar tree. He's tall, he's strong, but he doesn't give off fruit. And the Rebbe says over there in the Sikha that the main point is to be tzadik katomo yifrach, that you give away from your time and your own energy and your faculties to produce fruits to have an impact on others. And as we'll see, Mr. Shem, later on in this video, that this, I believe, represents the epitome of Reb Yoel's achievements. But before we get to Reb Yoel, we'll start with the Parsha Shavua, Parshas Devarim, which is the beginning of a new Sefer. And the Rebbe in two Sichas, in Chelik Daled and in Chelik Yutes, speaks about the Gemara, that the Gemara says that the difference between Sefer Devarim and the other Svarim is that Sefer Devarim mipi עצמו. It says that Moshe said it on his own. And Tosfos adds b'ruach HaKodesh. And why does Tosfos have to add b'ruach HaKodesh? Because obviously, when it says that Moshe said it mipi עצמו, it doesn't mean that he made it up. Because we know there's a Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva that says whoever says that there's a word in the Torah that comes from Moshe himself and not from Hashem is kaifer, etc. The whole Torah is Torah's min hashamayim. Ha-Torah zulitim b'chlefes. Because it comes from the Eibishter himself. So then if so, we have to understand what is the difference between the first four Svarim that are called, that the Eibishter, it's from the Eibishter, and Sefer Devarim, which is called mipi עצמו. So the Rebbe explains in Chelik Yutes, the Rebbe says there's two levels of the way something is transmitted. One way is called b'derech מעביר, passing through, and the other one is called b'derech התלבשות, that it becomes enclosed. So, to put it simply, we could say that b'derech מעביר means, imagine you're talking into a tape recorder, and then the tape recorder repeats what you said. Does the tape recorder understand what you said? Of course not. But nevertheless, it repeats perfectly what you said. So that's b'derech מעביר. The whole purpose of the tape recorder, is that it's able to carry, transfer, transmit the words that you said from one domain to another domain. Before you were limited that only people that could hear your voice could hear you. Now it could be sent to another country, etc., etc., etc. So that's b'derech מעביר. B'derech התלבשות means when you, let's say, a teacher talking to a student, and he gives over the words to the student. Let's say, even if the student will repeat all the words exactly as you heard it from the teacher, but nevertheless, the whole purpose of the teacher was that the student should understand. As seichel rav vert seichel talmud. That previously what was considered teacher intellect now becomes student intellect. The student understands. And I guess the best example, even though the Rebbe doesn't bring it there, but the Rebbe spoke this idea concerning a famous question. It says, every time you repeat something in the name of the person that you heard it, brings redemption to the world. And the Rebbe asked the question, we see many times that somebody said something and he didn't say it in the name of the person that he heard it. So sometimes the answer is because everybody knows you're such a famous disciple and student from this master that if you're saying it, it's because you heard it from the master. You're like one with the master. You're just like an extension of the master, of the teacher. But another explanation that Rebbe gives is that when did you repeat it in the name of your master? When it didn't really become one with you. So it's as if your master is saying it. Mashenkin, when it becomes united with you, so your master's not saying it, you're saying it. It's coming from you. And that's why, even though but you didn't say it because it's you who are saying it. It became united with you completely. It's al derech the famous word that I think somebody was once shown the Alter Rebbe, a chassid of another Guti Pelishe Rebbe, Reb חייקל. And he said, you see, look what kind of Rebbe he is. Look at his chassid. Look at that chassid via Brent. He was with an unbelievable passion and fiery enthusiasm in his davening. So I think the Alter Rebbe said, Brent, חייקל Brent in him. It didn't become united with him. It's not really his. He doesn't really own it. It's just that the Rebbe has his Rebbe, Reb חייקל, has such powers that he's inspired by Reb Chaikel's inspiration. It's Reb Chaikel's inspiration, which is burning, but it's not really that person. So this is the difference between Sefer Devarim and the first four Chamoshim of Torah. The first four Svarim of Torah is b'derech Ma'avir. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu is Hashem's microphone, Hashem's tape recorder. That's one level. Then there's another level where mipi עצמו, it became united with Moshe Rabbeinu's intellect. So when he's speaking, it's as if he's speaking. His intellect relates to it. It became his. And the Rebbe see there in Chelik Dalet and Chelik Yutes how the Rebbe explains why it was necessary at that time for Chumash Dvarim, for the Yidden that were going into Eretz Yisrael, and this gave the ability for all time, for Torah Shebal Peh, that a person should become united with Hashem's wisdom on the one hand. It remains Hashem's wisdom, Hashem himself, and nevertheless, you can understand it with human intellect. See there. And this brings us to Reb Yoel. Reb Yoel represents this idea. On a certain level, first I'll say the main point is that Reb Yoel was the Rebbe's mashpech. Mashpech is a filter. It's huge, broad at the top, but then it becomes small. He takes the Rebbe's words and brings it down to such a way that even if someone's not on a level who could understand it directly from the Rebbe, Reb Yoel was able to bring it down that someone on a lower level could understand it too. So Reb Yoel's the Rebbe's mashpech, Reb Yoel's the Rebbe's chayzer, Reb Yoel's the Rebbe's meturgiman, like a translator, to take the Rebbe's words and bring out the idea, but in a different language, paraphrase it so that it becomes relatable. Reb Yoel was the ultimate communicator. So before I want to get to the main tremendous lesson I think we have to take from Reb Yoel and Avodas Hashem about bittul and anivos and iskashrus, which his level in those areas was tremendous. First, I think we should talk about his qualities, his milas and giluyim, and then you'll see the hafla, how it's even so much more greater that he had such bittul. So, first I have to make it clear, I was a bacher in 770. from the summer of Mem Aleph till Mem Zayin. But I wasn't really one of Reb Yoel's boys. I didn't go to his house often. And I wasn't smart enough, you could say, or sharp enough. But I did hear some Shiurim from him, and I heard many brilliance from him. So on that basis, I could say what I'm going to say. First of all, Reb Yoel was gebenched like nobody else. He was gifted in Chochmah, Bina, and Das, in all areas of Chabad. Chochmah, his creativity, and how he looked at things. So he went an andere Cook. It was a whole different perspective. You can't be born Rabbi Yale Kahn. He had a special gift of Chochmah, originality and perspective and outlook that was totally different. Sometimes when you went to his shir, you had to enter into his world. It was like a different way of thinking. That's his Chochmah. His Bina, everybody knows his Bina, he's the king in Bina. Nobody could explain something the way Reb Yoel would explain it. That's why he's the most unbelievable communicator. With his Misholim. And by the way, when he taught, all the time when he would be teaching, every once in a while in the shir, he would say, Versteht? You understand? I've had different mashpiyim. They wouldn't say that. But he was very, very into the whole idea that whatever he was teaching should be understood. And he had a special talent in that. His Bina was unbelievable. Explaining, elaborating. And he would say it often in the shir, Versteht? And if he spoke for 45 minutes to an hour and he felt that he didn't hit home, you could see that he was physically upset, like the point didn't come across. That's his Bina. His Das, his Amkus. Everyone knows that he was able to go out of the world, time and space. There are those that know it from Tafshel Lamed Ches. When Rabbi Yale worked on the Rebbe's Sichos, that the Rebbe said on Motzei Shabbos, they say that Rabbi Yale locked himself away Motzei Shabbos till Monday morning straight, working on the Sicha and the Maimer. And then the Rebbe was Magiyat. And I'm sure those that were in Rabbi Yale's presence when he worked on all the Maimarim Melukit and Likutei Sichos will be able to attest to this power of his, of being lost in depth in concepts of Chassidus, that he would just lose sense of time and space. That's his Das. Then there's his Chush HaKsiva. Nobody could write like Rabbi Yale. Amazing. Whoever studied his writings, not only, that he worked on Likutei Sichos and the Maimarim, but the famous letter that he wrote about the Satmar ideology. There's other things that he wrote. He wrote a Mavui to Sefer Echem that was never printed in Sefer Echem. So there's no writer like him. And then this is Zikaron, his memory. He's the Chayzer. Nobody had a memory like him. His Chush HaNegina, the way he sings songs. So in every single department of intellect, he was king. Nobody comes close. And by the way, talking about his teaching, just a bit of anecdotes, so you can learn those that teach. Besides for saying, Verstehst? Also, he had an unbelievable ability like no other teacher, that he was able to go into the person's brain, into the student's brain, and do the surgery and transform what you thought and the way you thought previously, and now you got it right. He used to say, "Ufanid der pshat." It was either sanid der pshat, or he would say sometimes sanid der pat, because he had a lisp. But he brought out the contrast, like the havchana. Every single thing, when you want to really understand, there's two ways to look at it. You have to bring out the contrast. When he would say sanid der pshat, that was the key to understanding the whole concept properly. So he was able to go into your brain, understood where your mistake was, and correct it. And now you understood properly. By the way, whenever he taught, he got so involved in the teaching, he didn't have a watch. So many times, usually after going on for 50 minutes or 55 minutes, he would say, "Vual der Deger, What time is it? Because he just lost track of time and he was getting so involved. And if it was still early, then he would start going in depth into something else. So here you see Reb Yoel's qualities of Chochmah, Bina, Das in the realm of intellect. He was tops. And nevertheless, when we talk about his bittul to the Rebbe and his iskashrus, it's amazing. First of all, I heard from people that on a regular Shabbos, let's say it was in the summer, so Rabbi Yale's by the Fabrengen, he heard the Fabrengen. On his way home, he usually would take a bacher home from his small circle of immediate Talmidim of that year, and he would chazer the Fabrengen the whole way home. He'd come home, this I heard from eyewitnesses, he chazer a sicha or two for his Rebbetzin. If it was a summer, I heard from eyewitnesses too that Rabbi Weinberg, who on a Motzei Shabbos would review a sicha or two from the Rebbe that the Rebbe spoke Shabbos by Fabrengen, he would come to Reb Yoel's house and they would discuss a sicha, chazara, to make sure Rabbi Weinberg got it right. Motzei Shabbos was the regular chazara, where Reb Yoel was chazara, and you see all those pictures of 50 people that are there. And each time Reb Yoel's giving chazara, it's already by now the third or the fourth time, it's with the zelbe chayis and with the zelbe shturim, with the same excitement and enthusiasm. And then came Sunday, when I was a bacher shlich in California in 81, Memalef Membeis, Reb Yoel used to make a chazara audio, a recording. So by now, Reb Yoel is giving chazara already for the 6th, 7th time. And he still did it with the same chayis, with the same enthusiasm. Bechlal, the nature of a person is, the greater your genius, the more you have a koch in your eigen inyanim, in your own theories, in your own ideas, in your contribution to the canon of science or whatever it is. And by Reb Yoel, there was none of that whatsoever. Reb Yoel could give you shiras hamarvav and ayin beis with all of his Torahs, which are found in the back of Sefer Devarim, many of them. But nevertheless, he could chazer a sicha from Chilik Aleph and Beis 30, 40 years later with the same chayas and the same shturim, as if he's saying a word. The deepest, loftiest, profound concepts in Pnimius HaTorah and Kabbalah. Obviously, Chilik Aleph and Beis is the zelbe etzem haRebbe. But nevertheless, Chilik Aleph and Beis could be understood. You know, when you're 12 years old, we learned it when we were 12-year-olds. Many of those sichas are 13-year-old. And there are other things that you can think. You need somebody who's a big fashtayer that could be able to transmit it and give it over. But no. You see that Reb Yoel had the zelbe chayes with the Chilik Aleph sicha, with the Chilik Beis sicha. In general, I heard in the last couple of years, I'm already living in Melbourne since Tafshin Memtes. So, I wasn't around after Gimel Tammuz in New York, but I heard also from eyewitnesses that in Yache Kala in camp, there were many a time where Reb Yoel is arguing with all the other younger mashpiyim about learning the Rebbe's Torah. So this is like against all the nature of the Teva B'nei Adam. Usually, when you hear stories of Chassidim, who are the Tzehitztim Kusharim? The younger Chassidim. And the older Chassidim, like they say, you mellow out with age. And here, I heard from many, that other mashpiyim, 10 years younger, 20 years younger, 30 years younger, 40 years younger, than Rabbi Yale were arguing with him about how you have to learn the other earlier Chassidus in order to understand the Rebbe's Maimarim. And he's arguing with every single one of them about learning the Rebbe's Maimarim. That's it. And he was pushing to learn the Rebbe's Maimarim. So this is astonishing. How Rabbi Yale, this Kana Mashpiyim, he's the one who's pushing the Rebbe's Chassidus. And the younger Mashpiyim are not as powerful in pushing the Rebbe's chassidus as much as Reb Yoel was. And to me, those are members Fabrengens, the way he would speak about his kashrus. Now's not the time to say over all the stories. Maybe in the next couple of weeks I'll repeat things that I already repeated before. But this idea, how Reb Yoel was completely bottled, and this is what makes him outstanding. Basically, he had no life. Kol kulei was the idea of Eined Movade, Elikus. From him you heard more than anyone else. The Maimer Azal, Ani lei nevresi el l'shamishes keini. Is gekocht sich in them for decades and decades. The union of Achta Savaya and Bittel. And therefore, when I was in 770, what the schedule of Rabbi Yale used to be was, without exaggeration, a Sunday night he went to Lakewood, a Monday night he's going to Williamsburg, a Tuesday night he's going to a different place. He's giving Tanya Shiurim, spreading Chassidus, meanwhile also chazing the Rebbe's Torahs in those places that they don't necessarily, at that point in time, weren't ready to receive from the Rebbe. He nevertheless chazed Vertlach from the Rebbe all the time, from the Kutei Siches. And who knows, I imagine that was his real intention. So he'd give the Shaitanya, and then he chazed a word from the Pasha Shavua, and he wouldn't necessarily say it's from the Rebbe, but it was really straight out of the Kutei Siches. So, Reb Yoel, you know how many thousands of hours he spent in a car? Just going here and going there and going everywhere, giving shiurim. Kol in Yonei was a Fatzas HaMe'anis Chutza, and with the Matara to bring in Nacha Yidin zum Rebbe, durch Chassidus, durch dem Rebbe's Torah. So he's totally bottled. He could have said, I'll give a shir in my neighborhood. But to spend so many hours in a car, you have to speak to the ones who are the drivers. Thousands of hours, if we talk about all the years. And this is what we started today's video with. Tzadik katomor yifrach. Dosig even Reb Yoel didn't look at his time, didn't look at his energies. He just gave of himself totally to influence others, to communicate, to bring Divrei Rabbi Seinu to others, Chassidus and Befrat and Rebbe's Torah. I'll just finish with two anecdotes that bring out his anivus and his bittel. There was one Fabrengen where late at night, after a lot of mashke, he started speaking about Kabbalah Sale. And he was saying, you could talk about Kabbalah Sale, you could explain Kabbalah Sale, aber für weiter Seichel, für nicht Kabbalah Sale. It's not real Kabbalah Sale. It's weiter Seichel. And then he compared it, he said, as Meredveg Keiches and Nefesh, when we talk about the faculties of the soul, we say that in every one of the Keiches, there's all the other Keiches. Is far was the scholars HaKeiches? What makes it possible that there should be a scholars HaKeiches? Gvura in Chesed, and Tferes in Chesed, etc. That's a Nefesh. Because there's an essence which is the source of all 10, therefore affects that in each one of the 10, even as they come out of the essence, and even as they come out of the source, they could still join and become one, the coalescence of the faculties. Is farvas the scholars HaKeiches mitzaretzem HaNefesh. Aber at Gvura kommt dann in Chesed. But a Gvura arrives, lands in Chesed. It does nicht kein Gvura. The weiter Chesed. Once Gvura goes into Chesed, it becomes really Chesed. And what's the analogy of Gvura Shebechesed? The father who takes away a dangerous toy from the son, a shiny knife. So it's Gvura because the child might start crying. But it's really obviously Chesed because the father doesn't want the child to be harmed. So the Gvura Shebechesed is weiter Chesed. And then he said, there's Elbezachas with Kabbalah Sale, the same thing. And he was obvious, and he started crying, and he repeated this like for an hour. We can reden wegen Kabbalah Sale, we can verstehen wegen Kabbalah Sale. You could talk about Kabbalah Sale, you could understand about Kabbalah Sale. You can know about all the milas, the advantages and benefits of Kabbalah Sale, and how great the avodah of Kabbalah Sale is. But it's still intellect. And the whole time he was saying this, he was crying. And obviously, here you see Reb Yoel, he was crying because he was talking to himself and thinking to himself like he wishes he would just have simple Kabbalah Sale. The advantage of a ish poshet that has simple bittul, obedience, without understanding. And he was lamenting, so to speak, that he's a person that has powerful intellect. So it's still not Kabbalah Sale as long as it lands in the world of intellect, in the world of Reb Yoel, so to speak. So it's not pure, it's not real Kabbalah Sale. So here we see the bittul of Rabbi Yale. He's crying a whole night that he doesn't have real Kabbalah Sale. And the second story I've said recently is what happened with me one year. I forgot which year it was. This was like, I would say, Lamed Vav, or Lamed Zayin. I think I was in Mesifta, and Ocean Park would have a huge farbrengen on Yutas Kislev. Everybody would come, even from 770, and all of that in Holla. And Rabbi Yale would talk. So we all gathered there. I forgot if it was in the Zal of Ocean Parkway or if it was in the lunchroom. I think it was in the Zal. So there's a big, tables brought together. And I'm sitting in the left-hand corner of one of the tables, right across Rabbi Yale. And the whole place is packed. There's like 100 people there, maybe 150. And Rabbi Yale's talking. And I used to like to write things, scribbling notes. So I must have had a small pad. And I was writing some notes, what Rabbi Yale was saying. And my head is down. And I'm like, 15, 16. And my head is down and I'm writing down in small print, scribbling things that Rabbi Yale was saying. Anyways, as my head is down, all of a sudden I hear, "Was das news reporters?" I hear somebody say, "What is this, news reporters?" Anyways, and it's quiet. Anyways, I pick up my head, and there's Reb Yoel staring right at me. And he says again, straight to me, across the whole Zal. And I'm sitting over there in the corner, "Was das news reporters?" My face turns green, yellow, purple, and obviously I stopped writing. So, think about this for a second. What's Rabbi Yale saying already? He's chazing a sikh from the Rebbe. He's not saying his own stuff. But nevertheless, the thought that somebody's sitting over there writing down, taking down verbatim what he's speaking is like, how could you bring attention to yourself, so to speak? He couldn't take it. And he's telling me, "Was das news reporters? What are you, a news reporter?" He's sitting over there writing down what I'm saying. And we think about the contrast today, just the younger generation doesn't realize this. When I was a bacher in the 70s and even in the mid 80s, if we wanted to tape a shir of the mashpia of Reb Yoel or Reb Melech, you couldn't do it in public. Let's say you're recording a shir, the chassid, the mashpia would say, I don't want my words to be recorded. Who am I, b'chlal? That's how much they stayed away from anything that would draw attention to themselves or leave a legacy. The idea of a chassid thinking that he has to leave a legacy is a total contradiction to everything that chassidus stands for. And today, we have these influencers that give a sneeze, and the sneeze has to be recorded forever for all of posterity in history. And we have to think from time to time, of what it says in Ches Tishrei. Chsidim arishonim oyu mastirim atzmom. Early Chassidim would conceal their spiritual achievements. And if someone found out, they'll be at pain, they'll be distressed. So the Eibusher should help that the Reb Yoel, Reb Rafal, Nachman, HaKohen should have an aliyas haneshama, and this should be Lili Nishmasai, and we should all learn from him what it means to koch sich dem Rebbe's Avot, what it means that our life is totally dedicated to the Rebbe and to the Rebbe's Inyanim, and to be a person that toils with his intellect as much as he can to try to understand Chabad, Chassidus, but at the same time to be passionate, to have a drive in all the Rebbe's Inyanim, and the Rebbe should help, that we should do our part in learning from Chassidim how to be a Chassid from the Rebbe, and we'll all improve, and this will bring the Gula Mitzvah Shleimo, take it from Yad Mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.